Hello, folks. Welcome to Holding On with Holder, where I talk to interesting people about interesting topics. My name is Steve Holder, and I am your host. My guest this evening is Julie Sanford. She is an author, recovery mentor, and public speaker. Welcome, Julie.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about your background and how would you describe yourself?
Of course. So I am a wife, a mom. I have three kids. I have two grown daughters and a little boy who's 9. Um, as it relates to what I do, as you said, I'm a recovery mentor for wives of alcoholics. And my husband and I had kind of always drank socially throughout our relationship. There was a couple of times where I was a little bit concerned about maybe like him going a little bit too far over the line on a few occasions, but it wasn't really anything that interfered with our lives until he lost his father a few years back. And after that, it just really seemed to be a downward spiral after that. That's kind of when things really changed for us.
Yeah. Now, did you ever have an alcohol or drug problem personally?
I did not. I did have it in my family, a little bit removed from me, but my uncle was
No.
an alcoholic, so I was a little bit familiar with having a person in the family that was drinking too much. But obviously, I had never been quite that close to it as with my husband. So.
So your husband started drinking excessively, obviously. So tell us about that.
So it got to be where it was just more and more, and he was also struggling with a great deal of depression. We did end up finding out once he went to treatment that he was bipolar, so that was also coming into play, and we didn't realize it. But that when him losing his dad just kind of was a trigger that just really made everything magnified. And so it started affecting our relationship. It started affecting his relationship with the kids and his work. And he would have episodes where he just found it hard to really function for a while. And so that was kind of the point at which, and I was holding down a full-time job in management, so I had a really stressful career. And then I would come home and deal with the stress at the house too. And so it was definitely life altering at that point.
Yeah. So are you or is your husband a part of a 12-step group, or have either of you ever been a part of a 12-step group?
He definitely was a part of that when he was going through the treatment center into diagnosis treatment center that was faith-based. And so they concentrated on the spiritual aspect of it very heavily, and they also concentrated on helping him with the bipolar disorder and getting the medication that he needed for that, as well as doing the 12-step program to deal with the addiction. And then I was also part of that. I hadn't really dabbled in Al-Anon very much beforehand. I wish that I would have, because now I know there's great value in getting help for yourself. When you're deep in it, you think that the other person is the only person that needs the help.
Yeah.
So now that's a big part of my message is, it's you both have to be in recovery. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
But as part of his recovery, I went to the treatment center. They had a family week for us. And so I went to the treatment center and stayed in the town where it was for a week. And they had us really involved in, the 12-step program and Al-Anon and all of that. And then when he got out and went into outpatient, we continued to go for a while after that too, to the
Yeah.
meetings.
A lot of people don't understand that alcoholism is a family problem. It's not one
Absolutely.
person. It is a totally dysfunctional family. And sometimes it doesn't even matter who's the cause and who's the result. It's just all messed up.
Yes, agreed. And you don't really think about the fact how you're so focused, as the perspective of the wife, you're so focused on your husband and trying to get him sober, and you're so just obsessed with it almost that you're not tending to your life either. He's
Right.
clearly not tending to his life, but you're not tending to your life either. I mean, I wasn't a good employee at that time. I wasn't, the mother that I usually would be at that time, because I was so focused over here instead of really trying to do my part as well, like I said, to be in recovery and not be a part of the bigger problem too.
Yeah. You both were definitely suffering through it all and trying to cope the best you could.
Yes,
And
for sure.
it was hell for both of you.
Yes, exactly.
So are
Exactly.
you
And
fearful now that your
his kids
husband
were
might
kind of
drink
caught in the
again?
crossfire. Um, those thoughts do pop up occasionally. As I found, he's been sober for a little over 4 years now, and I found as the years go on, it gets a little bit less. When he is under a lot of stress, or when something really major happens, like anything that's super emotional, I think that's probably when I worry about it the most, because that was his coping mechanism for so many years, that I kind of that the thought does cross my mind, when we're struggling with anything in particular like that. But other than that, just the day to day, I mean, I don't. He's been doing a really great job, and he's pretty open with me too. He we talk about recovery, and we talk about how things used to be and how things are now and how we got here. It's still a topic of conversation sometimes. So we do have good communication around it, which helps.
Yeah. So tell us about the anger that you felt when he was drinking. I know you had plenty of it.
I sure did, and it was directed towards him, obviously, because I felt like he was the problem. Like I said, without realizing that I was also contributing to the bigger issue. But I had a lot of anger at God too during that time, and I had been a person of faith for my whole life since I was a child, and I found it to be just a real test of my faith, because I felt abandoned by God during that time. I felt, that that none of us deserved what we were going through. I felt like God wasn't showing up, and why wasn't he helping us? And I had a whole lot of anger around that. So now that's kind of part of what I do, is first recognize, letting women know who are going through this, that happens. It's a normal part of it, because you do kind of have your faith tested, and then kind of showing them different ways that they can get around that, and showing them that God is still there, even if you feel like he's totally quiet. So I had anger from both those sides, for sure.
Yeah. And I know you were very, very lonely during that time, wasn't you? Were you very lonely during that time when he was drinking?
Absolutely. I think one of the hardest things is that, you don't feel like your husband, your real husband, is around that much. I would have a hard day at work and wanted nothing more to just come home and have somebody to commiserate with me, and, tell me everything was going to be okay, and encourage me and be my cheerleader, and everything that he normally would be. And that person wasn't here a lot of the time when I got home. He was already drunk, and I couldn't have a conversation with him, and I didn't have anybody to kind of lean on. I had to be the one to always try to hold it together. And so there was a lot of loneliness there. I missed him. He was in the house with me, but I missed him every day, because the husband that I knew and loved and married wasn't around that often anymore. So that was a very, very hard part of it, for sure.
You also feel very disappointed in him.
Yeah. And that, once we realized that he was diagnosed with bipolar, that made a huge difference for me, because, I think a lot of us as wives, we kind of think that there's a lot more choice involved in alcoholism than there actually is. Um, I definitely did for a really long time. I felt like he was choosing it over me, and he was choosing alcohol over the family. And I didn't really fully realize until I went to the treatment center with him, and they started talking to us a lot about that there wasn't a whole lot of choice left in it at that point. And so realizing that, and realizing that he was also struggling with bipolar disorder, which we had no idea, and knowing that it had been that hard for him, and I had kind of been cold towards that, it was a real wake up call. But yeah, at first, I was totally blaming him for being, a disappointment, and for being the one who I felt like was causing trouble in the family, and not making the choice to change it, when in reality it wasn't
Yeah.
as easy as that.
And you thought he had a choice at that time, didn't you? You thought he
I
had a
did
choice.
for yep, for a while. I really did, and I didn't understand what he was going through. So that's something else that I really try to talk to the women that I come in contact with about, is they're having issues that we don't understand. They're fighting this battle that we don't understand, and it's
Yeah.
not just as easy as making a choice, or else it wouldn't be such a widespread issue. It's it's something that the choice is removed at that point. So that was a huge light bulb for me, and really, really helped, I think, with both of our recovery, because I saw what he was going through in a totally different light.
Yeah. So what gave you hope? When did it turn around for you and you decided, there may be a way out of this?
Honestly, I really had to come to a point of just being broken. I mean, they say that alcoholics have to hit their rock bottom, but I felt like I did too. I just, like I said, I had so much anger at God. I had so much anger at my husband. I had so much anger about the situation that we were in. And I just remember so clearly one day I was in the shower and just had the water as hot as I could stand it, because I was just mad. And I just started like screaming at God. It wasn't like a calling out to God, like you hear about in the Bible. It was a screaming at God, like out of being mad.
Yeah.
And, I just basically was yelling at him to help us. Like, you got to show up. Like, we're not going to make it. He's not going to make it. He had had a couple of suicide attempts through this. And I felt like either he's going to die, we're going to end up divorced, like our family is going to fall apart. I just thought that all of that was imminent. And it wasn't too long after that where I just kind of felt like I came to the end of myself. And it was almost like I didn't have anything left to do, but just wait for God to take it over, because I had tried everything I knew to try at that point. And as soon as I kind of came to the end of myself, I started noticing that was happening. Like the tables were turning a little bit. And it was shortly after that where he agreed to go to recovery and go to treatment. And so I just think that I, he had to be ready, but I had to be ready as well, because I was walking my own destructive journey.
Yeah.
And so it kind of just, I had to come to the end of that too, to realize that we both needed help, and that, I could help him in different ways and more helpful ways than I actually had been before.
Yeah. Did you feel a stigma before he quit being a wife of an alcoholic?
Very much so, very much so. And that actually was one of the reasons why I did not go to get involved in Al Anon sooner than I did, because, I was embarrassed. And especially as a person of faith, I just felt like, well, okay, well, we're not supposed to have these problems, So I felt like that was an extra layer on top of it. But
Yeah.
I kept it from a lot of my friends. I mean, my family didn't know how bad it was, because I didn't want them to think poorly of him, because he's a great guy. Like, he's a good man. He just had this struggle he was going through. And it just, there's such stigma around it. And just I think it keeps a lot of people from getting help, both on the alcoholic side and on the side of the family, because you just have this preconceived notion of how, like, quote unquote normal families don't have these problems. And
Yeah.
it couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, there's a lot of normal families who have this problem. You just don't hear about it, which, like I said, kind of makes people want to stay hidden, which is a big part of the
Yeah.
problem.
And I'm sure you had to tell a lot of lies to cover up for him.
I did. I didn't get too deep into, like I never did like the calling in to work for him and things like that, but I definitely tried to cover up a lot of stuff here at home, and a lot of stuff with our family and friends.
Yeah.
Like I said, I just didn't want people to know what was going on, because I didn't want them to think bad of us as a family, of him. I didn't want it to worry anybody. And I kind of have that attitude that, it's okay. Like, I can handle it. Like, I'm working on trying to fix it, without realizing that that was never going to work if I was just
Yeah.
trying to do it by myself. So yeah, it was definitely challenging for sure.
Did you have any idea in the back of your head? Did you ever feel guilty like you was causing his drinking? He probably accused you of that a few times.
Sometimes. Yeah, and that's another dynamic that the husband wife especially gets into, because it's this vicious cycle of, you're trying to help, but he's viewing that as being an attack, and so he's throwing it back at you that what you're doing is making it worse, and you're saying, you're stuck in the cycle of, well, I'm only doing that because you're drinking, and so it definitely kind of goes round and round for sure.
Yeah. It's a vicious cycle.
It really is, and
Yeah.
definitely not one that I care to repeat. But I do know, like I was saying, when those thoughts do come in the back of my mind of, what if this happens again? Obviously, I don't want that for me or him or my family at all. But I feel like now, at least it wouldn't be like, I don't view it as like, okay, well, if he ever takes another drink, then our world is just completely going to fall apart and that's it. I know a lot of, not, I know a lot of things now that I didn't know then.
Yeah.
And so does he. So we have a lot of tools that we didn't have before. And so I know that, it wouldn't be like just the end of everything if it ever happened again. I feel like now I know that it's something that we can get through because we have
Yeah.
already.
So how did your kids deal with it all when he was drinking?
It was pretty hard. So my son at the time was 4 or 5 ish. I had my daughter still at home. She was, I want to say, like late teens, and then my oldest daughter had already moved out. And so, the kids, the two that I had here, were obviously in the closest proximity. But I think, for them, the fighting was the hardest thing because we did a really poor job of trying to keep them sheltered from that, which again, I know now a million things that I would do differently. That's definitely one of them. But I think that they did a better job during that whole thing of kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt and seeing it a little bit differently than I did. I think, I kind of took it more personally than they did. I think they did a little better job of seeing it more as a struggle for him and feeling bad that he was dealing with that, and I did too, but a lot of it did turn into anger because of the dynamic of the husband wife
Yeah.
relationship. So, but it was hard for them for sure. My son, we've talked about it a little bit. I don't really like to bring it up too much, but he knows why daddy doesn't drink, and he remembers that it wasn't a happy time. He doesn't remember like a
Yeah.
lot of detail. My daughter, who was here through it all, just is very thankful that everybody made it through in one piece, and we just appreciate our family and each other so much more than we did because we
Yeah.
walked through it together. So I guess that's the upside of it.
Did you go through a stage after he stopped drinking that you felt like, wow, he was easier to get along with when he was drinking?
For a little while, yeah. There was a little bit of a period where because he was also under doctor's care for the bipolar. So he was like, learning to be sober and learning this new life, and then also having adjustments with medication and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was hard. I mean, he was definitely more somber. Like he's a pretty happy-go-lucky kind of guy, and I just remember when he first came home from treatment, he was definitely like kind of quiet and somber, and you could tell like he was in his head a lot, just trying to, I guess, figure things out. And so I just had to realize that he needed his space, and I try not to ask him if he was okay too much, or like really be too much in his bubble. But yeah, it was a little bit hard because it was an adjustment, but
Yeah.
I kind of knew where it was coming from. So I knew it was temporary. So that was kind of something that I kept in the back of my
Yeah.
mind all the time.
Do you trust him now?
I do. I do. And I know that if he ever relapses, that it won't just be, okay, well, I'm just going to decide to have a drink today. Like we've talked about that. And like I said, we know that that's a real possibility, but he sees things differently now, and I see things differently now. And so I feel like we're more equipped to handle it. And I do trust, his decisions, and I don't worry about it too much. But like I
Yeah.
said, I don't think that it's the end of the world if it happens. Like we
Yeah.
know a lot more than we did.
So you help people, you help women now to deal with what you went through, correct?
I do. And it was such a hard learning curve for me. And I feel like all of our instinctive responses are pretty much the opposite of what is actually helpful, which you don't realize when you're in it. You think that you need to fix it, and you think that you can fix it, and you think that, if I just do this, or if he just does that. And I just remember feeling so confused and so frustrated because nothing that I was doing was working, without realizing that it was never going to. And so I try to love on them because I know that you just need so much support because you are hiding a lot of the time from your family and from your friends and even your church. And I try to show them that there's other ways to do this that are way healthier for both you, your husband, your entire family dynamic. And then, like I spoke about before, I try to help them just find God in it, because sometimes it just really feels like he's so super far away. And if you can tap into that and realize that he's not, that he's there, it makes the journey a whole lot easier.
Yeah. So tell us about the course. I noticed your website, you have a 5-step course. Tell us about that.
So I have a couple of things. I have my course is a 30-day course, and that is basically kind of like a self-paced thing where you can go through different lessons and modules. I think there's 5 different lessons, and we talk about the different layers of it. You know, your recovery, your husband's recovery, the spiritual side, all of those things. And then I do have also, I think it's the workshop that you're referring to. I have that 5-step workshop that you can get. That's actually a free product if they'd like to check that out. And it basically just kind of is um, a smaller snapshot of that, you know, five steps to breakthrough, it's called. And it just tells you some things that you can start doing right away to change the dynamic from just feeling like things are constantly falling apart and that you're just drowning, to feeling like, you know, you do have some hope, and you do have some ideas of things that you can do to move forward in a healthier way, to where life feels more manageable, basically.
Yeah. Uh, so there's 5 steps. Now, is it, you said it's spiritual, is it a Christian course or?
It is.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my faith. And that was a big part, like I said, of my recovery, and my husband's as well. So that's a big part of what I teach. I mean, it's not necessarily for people who are only Christians, you know, it is faith-based, but there's a lot of practical things in there that apply regardless of what your faith is. So,
Yeah.
but I did want to incorporate that because that was definitely a big part of my journey.
Okay. So people that's not a Christian could benefit from it also.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely some things in there that would resonate with everybody going through this.
Now, would it also be helpful to men if their spouse is an alcoholic, or is it just geared toward women?
So I usually just talk to wives because that's my personal experience, but really a lot of it doesn't, you know, it doesn't really matter which side it's on. If you're married to an alcoholic, a lot of these things are going to be things that will help you regardless. You know,
Yeah.
we all need tools to walk through this a little bit in an easier way. And so I think that that would definitely help the husband as well, for sure.
Yeah. And you also have a podcast?
I do. Yeah. I did have a podcast for something else that I was doing a while back, and that kind of fell by the wayside when this came about. I feel like this was something that I didn't necessarily really want to walk into this path because I knew it was going to be more challenging than what I was doing before. But at the end of the day, I feel like it is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing because of what I went through. Now I have a story and a testimony to tell. But I did have the podcasting experience from that. So, and I like podcasting a lot. It's one of my favorite mediums for just kind of like getting the word out to people, and being able to just talk to people, and you know they can hear your heart when you're talking to, which is really important. So I did start one up for this as well. It's called the Married to Addiction podcast, and I think I'm about 10 episodes in or so. So yeah, that just got rolling a couple months ago, but I'm really enjoying it.
So what would you say to people that have or have a married spouse now that drinking him or herself to death, and you're worried? What advice would you give them?
The first thing is get some help for you. You know, we just are so focused and hyper focused on getting help for a loved one, and they absolutely need help as well. But it's going to be an easier road for yourself and for your loved ones. Like I said, your kids, and you know everybody who's involved in this. If you just get some help for you too, you absolutely need support. You absolutely need direction. You know, you need to be around other people who know what you're going through and can sympathize and understand. And you really can't understand what this life is like unless you've walked through it.
Yeah.
So that's always my very first piece of advice, is just get some help and support for yourself. You know, I know that it feels counterproductive sometimes because you're so worried about getting help for someone else, but you're helping that other person by getting help for yourself as well.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely the first thing I feel like they need to do.
Learning that tough love is a hard thing, isn't it?
Yes, for sure.
If you don't learn that, you definitely can love someone to death, trying to take care of them and
Yes, absolutely.
enable Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's like I said, it feels very counterproductive. So
yeah,
getting the support around, why you need to do that and how you need to do that is just so, so critical to the success of the family as a whole, I think.
yeah. And I think it's also important for people to understand that alcoholism is a disease. It is
Yes,
not
I
a
agree.
moral failure. It is not a bad habit. It is not a hang up. It is a disease. It is a family disease, and it infects the whole family as well as affects the whole family.
Yes, absolutely. And I didn't even realize, I guess, or think about it at the time when we were going through it, but it's trauma. It's trauma for everyone involved.
Yeah,
And I even ended up with some PTSD type symptoms.
yeah,
And you don't realize when you're walking through it, but everybody who's going through that, it is massive trauma that your family is
sure,
undergoing. And
sure.
everybody needs help for that, not
Yeah,
just the person who's drinking.
yeah. I've not only have been in AA for about 38 years, but I've also go to adult children of alcoholics,
Hmm.
which has been very helpful for me. Even though my parents weren't alcoholics, it was still a very dysfunctional family. And, it's helped me to process through things from that perspective also.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, those programs, I mean, they've helped a lot of people and they're there for a reason. And it does feel a little uncomfortable at first to admit that you need help or even sometimes realize that you need help if you're a family member. But
Yeah,
I'm just telling you, the road is way harder if you don't get some support for yourself.
yeah. It's very good to know that you don't have to do it alone. There
Yes.
are people that understand, people who have been there, people who will guide you through it and say, yeah, I know exactly what that feels like, and here's what I did. You know,
Exactly. And I don't think that you can do it alone. I mean, I tried that
Um,
for a couple of years and
yeah,
it didn't work out. And I don't really know any other cases where it has, just trying to do it by yourself. Like you've got to get some help for everybody involved.
what's that they say in Al-Anon? You didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I really wish that I had not only known that sooner, but really absorbed it sooner, really accepted it sooner. Because, like I said, I don't feel like you can't really turn that corner until you come to the end of yourself. And that's where a lot of wives, especially, start is, well, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to control this. I'm going to, dump out the alcohol or check his receipts or whatever it looks like. And I just really feel like you have to come to the end of yourself and just realize that you have to give it over. You have to give it over to God. You have to give it over and get some help. And
yeah.
until you do, it's just going to continue to be an uphill battle.
And you had to learn to, I guess you could say, detach to a lot of
Hmm.
the things.
Yeah, yeah, that was a hard lesson for me because I felt like I was abandoning him. I
Yeah,
felt like it just felt very cold to me and it didn't make sense. I didn't really understand at the time that I wasn't detaching from him, as a person. I was detaching from the addiction and detaching from my obsession with it and the unhealthy, I was almost making it like an idol in my life. Like that's what I needed to detach from.
yeah,
Like that was his and God's. That wasn't mine to carry around. So that's also a lesson that I think is a hard learned one sometimes, but once you figure that out, it makes all the difference for both of you.
yeah. Well, I'm certainly glad that you are helping other people. And for anybody that's watching and wants to take your course, how do they get in touch with you?
So I'm pretty much married to addiction everywhere. So that's my website, marriedtoaddiction.com. That's the name of my podcast. That's my handle on Facebook, Instagram, all the things. So yeah, I mean they can find me there. You can also there's also a contact form on my website if you have any particular questions. Feel free to just let me know. I mean, I'm happy to help in any way that I can. I know how hard it is. I really, really do. And I just care so deeply for other people who are going through this because I just remember it like it was yesterday, just the loneliness and the struggle. So, however I can help, I'm more than happy to and honored to be a part of
Yeah.
anybody else's recovery.
Well, Julie, thank you for being my guest. I wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you
I
so
know
much.
you've
I
been through
appreciate it.
hell, so I hope you have a lot of happiness and contentment now.
Thank you. Yes, life is really good. I can't complain. So thank you so much
Okay.
for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, thank you for being here. And folks, thanks for tuning in to Holding On with Holder. Please subscribe to my channel. Feel free to share this video all over social media and check out marriedtoaddiction.com, right?
That's right.
All right. Thanks, Julie, for being my guest, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Bye-bye.